Hello and welcome. Getting ready for everybody to pop on, and we are going to be talking about one of my favorite lessons that I like to go over with you, and that is going to be the Fair Housing and Consumer Protection. And 2 years ago was the 50th anniversary of our current fair housing laws. And so there was a lot of good information that came out. So we'll just wait here a moment. I'm going to have a cup of tea while we're waiting for everyone to pop on. It's not raining and it's a nice day here. So people are probably scrambling to get back into class on time. I'm just checking right now to see if I have any messages from you guys. No, everything looks good. Oops, and people are popping on. All right. Okay, as you pop in, guys, remember, just give me a quick little text to let me know that you can hear and see me okay before we start going through this. I am going to be, let's see, who's on here? Who is that on there? I'm going to be adding some videos and the slide presentation. Now, we've done this before, and we've done the fair housing where I went and I presented to you guys at the beginning of the unit for fair housing, the National Association of Realtors Fair Housing. Hey, Heather, video. So Heather, you may not have seen the video that I'm speaking of right now. If you go to YouTube and you just click on National Association of, if you just type NAR Fair Housing, you will see about 15 videos. And the first one that comes up is pretty cool video, and it gives you a great rundown of, why the fair housing laws that we have now, they came to be. And they did a really good job. They put those out there about 2 years ago, because 2 years ago was the 50-year anniversary of our fair housing, the current fair housing laws that we use right now. So those are out there, and there's some on disability, the overview. If you're on your digital chalk, when you go there to do this unit on fair housing, you'll see that one particular video. So I have a couple of others that I am going to present with this lesson. And I'm just hoping, I've never done multiple ones on this format and then gone back to the slides. So we're going to just hope that everything is all good. I don't know who else is on there, if that's Chelsea, if it's Jen, Nathan, but I'm going to get rolling, guys. You know the drill. Just make sure that you let me know everything's okay. Also, make sure that nobody in your house is using a ton of bandwidth. If they are, I know under these circumstances right now, there's nothing that we can do about that. But just refresh. If for some reason, you get you go digital on me, just refresh the page and you'll come right back to where we are. I am hardwired in. I have a good signal on my end. If something goes funky here, I'll let you know that, so you're not scrambling around thinking it's you. So we are going to go right into the slide presentation. Maybe there. I keep going like this. It's because, work from home, people are working from home, and I am upstairs in a different office, and so I have things configured a little bit differently. The camera is right in front of me, and I'm trying to see around to the screen. So every now and then, if you see me go like this, it's not because I'm falling off the chair or getting ready to pass out. It's just because I'm trying to see my screen a little better. Okay. And I don't know who else is on there. I hope you can hear me. So basically what this says is fair housing makes us stronger. This is the logo that they put out there. You know, it's a new logo that National Association of Realtors uses. And it really does. Fair housing does make us stronger. There's a lot of rules and regs that you have to follow. Hey, Chelsea, I thought it might be you quiet over there. There's a lot of rules and regs that you have to know. Now you're going to need to know, I'm pointing out in this lesson, I'm going to really highlight the things that you need to know for your exam. You still, of course, need to do the state and the units that are on your digital chalk. And I see, Chelsea, you're going to be ready to take your exam soon. As soon as you're ready for me to start sending you questions, you know, more practice questions, let me know. And also, are you guys on your quiz bank? You got to use that quiz bank when you're getting that close to get refresh those questions, you know, in your mind. Anyways, that was just a side note. Sorry for everybody else that's on here. But I've been meaning to message you, Chelsea, about that. Let me know when you want some more testing, quizzing material. So what is the basic concept of the fair housing laws? Again, this is something I want you to know for the exam. The basic concept is that people have the choice to live where they want to live if it's within their financial means. So, you know, what does this video, the slide says, who am I does not determine where I could live. And that's where the sort of the heart of the fair housing practice comes from. All right. Okay. I got that, Chelsea. So, you know, that's the basic concept there. It just means that, you know, people have the right to live where they want to live if it's within their means. And what does it mean to us as real estate professionals? It means that we have to pay attention to all these things I'm going to talk to you about. What are their rights? You know, when I do this class, a couple of times I've done it like live. When I've done it live, I've had some landlords and so forth in the class, and I start telling them things that they can and cannot do, and advertising, and, you know, even other realtors, I talk about advertising. In my office, you know, we have, I really want people to be on social media. It's, you know, on Instagram, I have their own pages. I have one agent that's just going, she's just been awesome. She's, you know, really dedicated to her page, but, you know, I had to tell her that, you know, you have to put that equal housing now, even more so now, you have to put that, logo on there for equal housing opportunity on there. There's just a lot of little things. Your broker, when you start working, your broker, whoever you decide to work for, will train you on this stuff. I try to do training and make sure that people know, you know, they're keeping up with current laws, a lot of changes in social media with our advertising and so forth. So that's what this all means to you. Not only that, it means that you want to have a good reputation. All right. You want people to come back to you. Our business line, our main, you know, business is going to be based, and your main business is going to be based on those referrals. So you have some good client transactions. Those people are going to give you referrals. And so you want to make sure that you're not doing any of this stuff that we're going to talk about in here that make people think, you know, I don't know, are they a little shady, maybe doing some unethical things there, what's going on? All right. So you need to keep all of this stuff in the back of your mind when you're in the practice, not only for your exam. So when we talk about protected classes, which we're going to be talking about in a minute, this includes if they're a member of a protected class, if they're perceived to be a member of a protected class, like you think that this person is a member of a protected class, or their association with a protected class. So all of the things that when we discuss who these protected classes are, race, religion, sex, gender, age, all of that stuff, it's going to be, if they are, everything is going to apply to if they are a member of that protected class or perceived membership and so forth. We talk about who is the individual. The individual is going to be those home seekers. It doesn't mean like one person in this instance. So if it's a couple going to look at the home, we're treating them, their rights as the, as an individual. All right. It's real estate professionals. We're treated as, well, we have special law rules that we're going to talk about, but we're treated as individuals. And then if it's groups of individuals, this can be groups like minors, elderly, handicapped. You cannot pick a whole group of people, not just that individual, and say this whole group of people cannot do this or that. Again, discussing, but this in the beginning part is just kind of a little vocab. Testers. I took this ad off of Facebook, actually, that was just 2 years ago. People think, oh yeah, we learn about testers when we take our class, but are they really out there? In this was a Massachusetts advertisement for mass fair housing, and they were looking for testers just, a couple of years ago. They probably still are now, but they were posting jobs at $75 per test. We're going to talk about, what some of those things are that they do. We're going to get into a particular case, but this just goes to show, yes, they are still out there, and they are looking for testers. And so what do those testers do? Who are these people? What do they want them to test? They want them to go and check offices to make sure that the signs for equal housing opportunity are posted where somebody can see when they walk in the door of their office. They want to check their advertising. So they might hire some of these people to go through all of the ads, look through this newspaper, look through Facebook. I want you to check the advertising that's going on. The social media stuff, there's a lot of testing going on there. That's why we have to be very vigilant. Facebook is doing something which kind of helps us. If you go run an ad or you try to boost an ad, not so much if you post something, but if you try to boost it, sell an advertisement on there, if you guys know what that means, you pay for it and you say, okay, we want to focus on this area and this age group and so forth. They will say to you, oh no, wait a minute, we can't post that ad because you are breaking it down into a small group of people. You weren't intentionally trying to discriminate, but maybe you're pretty sure that somebody between the age of, 35 and 50 are going to be interested in this particular property that you had because it's maybe somebody that's upsizing or whatnot. So, you have to be really careful about that. If you put an ad and it gets, they review it. If it's a housing ad, you have to make sure you have your housing logo in there, a fair housing logo. If you do not have that in there now, they just will reject the ad. Then they just say, we reject this ad. Please make sure that you review our guidelines. That's happened to me a couple of times and they're very strict. So I go in and I look at my ad because I'm always pretty careful with that. And like this one, I had an ad and then I had a photo of myself and my agents. And in the corner of that photo was the equal opportunity. Well, the way it got placed on that advertisement, you couldn't really, it kind of got clipped off. Nope, they want to see that whole thing. So my ad got rejected for that. I just adjusted the photo in there and boom, it went. So these are the types of things when you go get into your business, you are going to, you're going to need to pay attention to. And again, don't get nervous. It's a lot to remember. I want you to remember a certain amount of stuff for the exam. And then wherever you work, you'll have your broker, your manager, your mentor, whoever will be walking you through a lot of this stuff in real life. Some of the other things that they do is they might respond to some of those ads. So, there's a rental shortage right now. There's really not very many rentals available. And so especially during this time, you might see more testers. I mean, they're out there all the time, but, especially when inventory is light. So they may have somebody who is brown, or they may have somebody who is maybe speaks broken English, or maybe just their last name. They may sound like they're, from the Middle East descent, something like that. And they'll call and they'll say, I'm interested in this apartment. And they'll say, oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry, that apartment has been rented. Okay, that's going to be a warning sign for that tester. Why? Was there something about my name? Was there something about, or it might be, oh, I'm interested in the apartment. Okay, who will be living in the apartment? Well, let's go take some information. Oh, it's going to be myself, my husband, my son. Oh, how old's your son? Oh, he's 4. You know what? Let me keep your information because that apartment just got rented recently. But let me keep this in case something else comes up. And that tester is going to go, oh, wait a minute. Are they discriminating against children? So, and so then they'll follow through. They'll follow that ad. Is that ad still there? They'll have somebody else call. Oh, hi, I'm interested in your ad. Oh, who's going to be living there? Oh, it's just myself and my roommate, blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah, sure. You can come and look at that apartment. So these are the types of things that they do. They want to look at the ads to make sure that you don't have any. And we're going to go through that list of things you should say and shouldn't say in an ad. They're going to go through those. Those testers are going to go through those. So, the real estate professional is not shouldn't be providing diversity information to home buyers. So like, oh yeah, how diverse is this area? They might call, I want to be in a neighborhood that's very diverse. That's this, that's that. You do not get into that. Just tell them where to go. Take a ride around the neighborhood. See what you think. You do not want to, even if it's a very diverse neighborhood, or even if it's whatever, you don't want to get into that with them. They have to go and they have to look it up. When we talk about the technique of matching, this is that same thing, that this leads to what I just said. They're going to call you and they're going to say, I want I need a 3-bedroom apartment or a house, and I need a fenced in yard because I have a doggy and blah, blah, blah. Once they start saying to you, and I want it in a good school system, I want it in a quiet neighborhood, I want it in blah, 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 all that stuff, don't even go there. You need to tell them to go. First of all, your idea of a quiet neighborhood might be different than their idea of a quiet neighborhood. The school systems, all of that stuff is public record. Go onto the town that you're going to and post everybody has hometown sites now. Post something in there. Hey, moving into the area. What are the school systems like? This and that. Make an appointment. Have them make an appointment. Find out who the superintendent is and stuff. You can give them that information. You just do not want to. You can give them the source. You can be the source of the source. So you can tell them where to go, but that technique of matching means you want to make sure that they're making their own decisions on where they want to go, because you do not want to be misleading. Like you're telling them where to go. There was a case, sometimes we have it, sometimes it comes up on your exam. I don't know that it does that often anymore, but it is in your book. So I'll bring it up. So there was a case, Havens versus Coleman. And it was heard in U.S. Supreme Court. And what had happened was there's an organization called Housing Opportunities Made Equal. It's called, the acronym for that is HOME. All right, so they sent testers out. Why they sent testers out was because they wanted to determine if Havens was practicing racial steering. So they had Coleman, a black tester, call, and he was told that there were no apartments available. But he said that, we don't have any available right now, but there's another apartment complex a couple blocks down, and I know they have some vacancies. Why don't you try them out? Well, Coleman was a black tester, and that other apartment complex was predominantly black people in there. Why? I don't know how that all shook out, but that's what happened. So he was saying, Havens was saying, no, nothing. I'm sorry, we don't have any available, but check down there. I'm sure they must. And then another white tester, Willis, called and said, I'd like to see that apartment. And I'm not sure if they actually went there to fill out an application or they called, because I wasn't clear on how they knew that Coleman was black. Anyways, Willis goes, he's white. He was told, oh yes, we have plenty of vacancies. You have your pick of blah, 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 blah. So Supreme Court did find that that Havens was practicing steering, meaning steering them somewhere else. We don't want you here, so we're going to steer you somewhere else. We're going to talk about blockbusting, steering, and redlining, which you absolutely need to know for your exam. And we're going to talk about a few more ways that steering takes place and ways you might do it without even realizing that you're doing it. And you have to be careful for it. So that's testing and the technique of matching. What are some of the organizations that deal with fair housing? We have HOME, which I just mentioned, Housing Opportunities Made Equal. HUD, that's one of the main organizations. MCAD is Mass Commission Against. I'm sorry, thought I silenced my phone. Mass Commission Against Discrimination. And we're going to go down a little bit in a minute and talk about the different who handles what kind of a complaint, where people should go, and so forth. But these are just some of the organizations that are available. Sometimes if they call HUD, HUD might refer, and they're in Massachusetts, HUD may refer them to MCAD. All right, so there's organizations out there to help people. Again, vocab word, who is the complainant? The complainant is the person that's filing the complaint. That's easy to remember. Who is the respondent? The respondent is the person that the complaint is being filed against. So again, a lot of this exam is vocab, knowing the vocab words. You all should be, practicing your vocabulary words in the back. Again, we have Quiz Bank. If you like to write them, a lot of people like to write them themselves. But we have Quiz Bank, and you can also go online to Quizlet. And Quizlet just put real estate exam vocabulary, and you're going to get a million of different sites. They have games, they have whatever. Vocab is really key to passing this exam. And then the other part of the exam is, you don't just know the definition of this. Can you take that and put it in a real life scenario? That's why I go through a few of these vocab words that you might see, because somebody might say, you might see a question that says, the respondent filed a complaint against the complainant, or you might not even say complainant. They might just say the respondent filed a complaint and the person had, in 30 days didn't get back to them, blah, 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 blah. Did he, and I don't know, I'm trying to make up a question on the top of my head here, but you see what I'm saying? They may use that respondent or the complainant in a vocab word to make sure that you know who is who in that question. So property owners, when we talk about property owners, when we get into the meat of this, we're going to talk about if you're an individual property owner, if you are a landlord, if you're a landlord of 2 or more family home, if you're a landlord of more than 3 properties and so forth, because there's different rules that apply to different types of property owners. Real estate agents and agencies. We're going to talk a little bit about what our responsibilities are in the fair housing, but what you're going to see in almost everything that we go through is, for example, an individual can sell his own property to whoever he wants to sell it to, and he cannot sell it to a particular race, religion, blah, 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 if he wants to, as long as he is not using a real estate professional. So those are the types of things that we're going to be talking about regarding us. And also what some of the fines are if we go against this. Management companies, we'll just touch on briefly. Basically, the management companies, they have to abide by the fair housing rules as well. Just like the real estate professionals do, they have to abide by all of these laws that we're going to go through as well. I don't know that there are questions about management companies. Like, if you're a property manager, make sure that you have the contract and it says what your job duties are and so forth. But I don't know that they hone down too much on management companies in the fair housing and consumer protection area. Mainly that making sure that you're making property available to everyone. All right. A little bit more vocab, and then we're going to get into the meat of this. So legitimate, not entrapment, just basically means that that you have to make sure, or the property owner, the landlord, or whatever, is going to make sure that they are abiding. And I guess this legitimate, not entrapment, I keep saying I'm going to change the slide, but I think that's how they put it in your book. This just basically refers to what we were talking about with the Havers and the Willis, saying that that Coleman couldn't have the apartment because he was black. He steered him somewhere else while Willis had it. So they have to be a legitimate answers to the questions. Do you have apartments available? Yes, I do. Do you have apartments available? No, I don't. Well, you better not, because if somebody else calls and you say yes, that person, is going to come back at you. And, it's not always, I tell the landlords and so forth, people that I work with like that, it's not just the testers. Like some people think, I'm just small time. I have a couple apartments, who's going to really call and check on me? It's not necessarily the testers that are going to be calling on you. They will still pick it up if you're doing something blatantly, against the fair housing laws in your advertising or whatever. But buyers and tenants are very savvy now. They have all of this information. Sometimes I think too much information. All of this information at their fingertips. They have zestimates, which are always wrong. So, you go and you want to have give somebody a price opinion on a house that they want to list. Well, when I looked my property up on Zestimate, it said that, I should be able to get this and that for it. Or the buyer says, they're offering this, but Zestimate says it's worth this. And you say, well, that's because Zestimate doesn't take into the fact that the house that they used to comp down the street from there is, was a complete rehab and blah, 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 blah. So my point is just that people are very savvy. They go on the internet. People know their rights. We're going to talk about another case in a little while, about a couple that had come over from Venezuela. And, people know what their rights are. So if you are not legitimately giving them the correct information and you're just a small time landlord or whatever, somebody's still going to bag you. So you need to be careful. Isn't he cute? I love this picture of this dog. I just happened to be looking at different images to put on here, and this one came up, and I was like, oh. So basically it says Fair Housing Watchdog. So this was the name of this site. And it just says, I make this face when I find out a housing provider's rules only apply to children. Remember, families with children need to be treated like everyone else under fair housing laws. One of those videos that you'll see if you go on, and I really do, I know you guys have a lot of information from me and you have a lot of videos, but those videos from National Association of Realtor on fair housing, they're just there's so much great information there. But one of them addresses this, like, it's a kind of an ad video for landlords. It says, common mistakes people do, and it's like, don't put up a sign that says, don't let your children ride on the sidewalk. What the sign should just say is no riding bikes on the sidewalk in this area, or don't let your children play in the common area, over here. No playing in the common area over here. So you see how an ad, just an ad by putting that child in there, maybe that's what they want. Maybe they figure who else is going to, who's going to be playing in there in that common area except for children. We don't want that because, we've planted grass. It could even be temporary thing. But most of the time it isn't. They just don't want children in certain areas. Well, you can't do that. And why? Because there's something called familial status protection. Familial status is if there is somebody under the age of 18 that lives in the property. You cannot make rules just because there's somebody, under that age. You cannot charge more of a security deposit for somebody because they have children or pets, by the way. First, last, security, and a rekey fee. That's it, period. No extra money for a pet. Oh yeah, well, we don't usually allow pets, but I'll let you have a pet. You just have to give me, another $500 in a security deposit, or you have to just give me another $100 a month in a rent. Absolutely not. It's illegal. You can't do that. Again, that's one of the things that the landlords that I have in my class, like their eyes bug out and they're like, what? Yeah, guys, go up online. There's a landlord tenant rule book. And you'll be able to, check all that stuff out and see all the things that you're doing wrong. Now because you're taking my test. But you cannot make certain rules for people just because they have children. You cannot deny somebody that has children. You cannot have a rental house that has lead paint in it and say, I'm sorry, I can't have any children in here because there's lead paint in the house. Don't ever say that. Don't say that because you will get in big trouble. You're going to have to de-lead that house. So what landlords do, there's ways to get around it. I won't, they just take everybody's application and then one person gets it, one person doesn't. But if somebody is living in that house and somebody gets pregnant while they're living in the house, they can't say, oh, you need to get out of here now because you became pregnant and my house has lead paint in it. You're going to have to de-lead that house. Because this middle part here says the familial status is not just 18 or under. It can also mean whether somebody is pregnant or getting legal custody, already has custody of one or more children under the age of 18. So in this, the example, it says that it would be illegal under FHA to refuse to rent to someone just because he has legal custody of his grandchild who is 16. So somebody, maybe they rented a place and maybe now they have legal custody of of somebody under the age of 18. That landlord cannot say, I'm sorry, I don't want any children here. You have to get out. Cannot do it. Or they go and he's looking for a 2-bedroom apartment and he fills that application out. How many people are going to live here? Just me and my grandson. How old is your grandchild? 16. Oh, sorry. You can't do that. It's illegal. So familial status, know that for the exam, 18 years or under. And it is also carries over to someone who is pregnant, getting legal custody, like adoption or something, or already has legal custody. All right, you guys ready? Now, I don't know if you're following along in your book. Remember, the lessons take a little bit of, they don't go word for word for word. We're going to get into it and just make sure that you're ready to go. If you're following along, a lot of this stuff, coming up here, you should be able to, you should be able to follow along easily. However, as I said, you follow along when you're doing the units and chapters on digital chalk. You don't necessarily have to follow in the book here. You can just take notes. All right. So when we go through all of these chapters and units, I tell you, there are not very many dates that I want you to remember for the exam. All right. 1978, stopped making lead paint. Any house that was built on or before 1978, you have to give lead paint notification and so forth. There's a couple of dates here and there. This is one of them. 1866. This was the Federal Civil Rights Act of 1866. They had been trying to get their act together a little bit before then, but they didn't. Finally, 1866, we had the Federal Civil Rights Act. And what I want you to remember is the one in 1866 only covered race, period. Nothing else. Only race. Race, that carries through for like right up until today, among other things. But even if you are an individual selling your own home, don't you be putting in that newspaper, I'm selling my home, I'll sell to anybody except for somebody that's brown or whatnot. You can't do it. You can still not discriminate against race, no matter what. Well, nobody can, but there are certain exemptions that we'll see to certain protected classes, not for this. But 1866, remember that in your head, write the note. What was the protected class? Race, that's it. Federal government effort to end discrimination in the provision of housing began the passage of civil rights. What happened? What happened from there? So in 1968, I always tell people, I don't want you to remember, this isn't necessarily a history exam that you're going to be taking, but there are a lot of things that happen in history that affect the laws that we have to abide by in real estate right now. Okay. So in 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated. What was going on during that time? There was just civil unrest. There were people marching in the streets. It was just, it was just mayhem. And then Martin Luther King was assassinated. 1 week after Martin Luther King was assassinated, Johnson signed a new Fair Housing Act, which added protected classes. So the protected classes that were in the 1968 version were the original race, color, religion, national origin. Okay, and you're gonna see that there's a few more that get added, and they were considered, they're still considered under the 1968, but they didn't happen in 1968. In 1968, the race, color, religion, national origin, and you'll see this in your book. Okay, just if you're just taking notes, just say, check 1968, what are the new protected classes? Then comes the 70s. So what was going on in the 70s? A lot of the same thing that's going on now, believe it or not. You see that sign there? I could be actually out there. I'm an old lady guy, so that was me marching. But what was happening in the 70s? Women were fighting for their rights. Okay, 70s, Vietnam was happening. Men were in Vietnam. The women were left home. Women, sometimes married women that had children, they could not rent apartments. They were not allowed to rent housing unless they had a man signing the lease with them. This is when women started fighting for their rights for equal pay. Heck, we're still fighting for that now. Anyways, for you guys out there, don't judge me, okay? I'm just telling it like it is. So they were fighting for equal pay. They were fighting for the housing. They were fighting for education. They were in college, and they could not get, unless they were living at the dorm in a all-female building, they could not go rent an apartment. So in 1974, sex was added. Sex was added. So now, even though that was in 1974, it still falls into that 1968 Fair Housing Changes, 1968 Act. 1866, just race. 1968, now we have race, religion, color, national origin, and now sex. Then came, in about the 80s, handicap. Now, when they say handicap, this is what they called it at the time. People say disability now, but it was handicap. It was mental and physical. And then sometime in the late 80s, I think, or the 90s, you don't have to remember those dates, they added the familial status. So now, 1866, race only. In 1968 Fair Housing Act, we have race, color, religion, national origin, sex, handicap, mental and physical, and familial status. So you see why we kind of went over some of those definitions before, because I want you to kind of understand what some of those terms mean. There's some crazy acronyms to remember this. You're going to have to pay attention to what the protected classes are, and wait till we get to Massachusetts, because in Massachusetts there's a ton more. But race, remember, and then somebody had told me this years ago when I've been doing this a long time, 20 something years, and it was kind of a silly acronym, but I remembered it. So I'm going to put it out there. If you look at it and say, no, this is just going to make me crazy, just scratch it out so you can't see it. But fresh corn, but spelled FRSH space CRN. Okay. You people that just look at a word that's misspelled, it will probably make you cringe. I'm a terrible speller, so maybe that acronym worked for me like that. But fresh corn, so the F would be familiar, R would be race, S would be sex, H would be handicap. Almost forgot what that was for a minute. C would be color, and then R again, religion, and then N, national origin. So any way that it takes you guys to remember that, just remember it, okay? You're going to need to know it, and need to know, I just put this date in there because maybe if some of you guys are history buffs, the 1974, it will help you remember, oh yeah, women's rights, sex got added in there. But just pretty much know 1866 race, and then 1968 all the others. What is discriminating? What are some of the prohibited practices for all of those? It's refusal to sell, rent, or otherwise deny. Okay? Refusal to sell, rent, or otherwise deny. This also carries into financing too. And we'll talk about that when we talk about redlining. So then there's discrimination in advertising. An individual cannot discriminate. Don't say this is a great building for professionals. Like you only want professional people in there and not children. Or don't say this is a great family neighborhood because you don't want young professionals in there. Okay, again, in your book, there's a whole list of things that you can say, can't say. You know, can you say mother-in-law? Can you say, I don't have that page open, but you'll see it. The chart comes, you know, you'll definitely see that chart. So, you know, those are the things that you can't say. You cannot say, you know, you cannot say great, you know, quick walk to the beach. Because then they might say, oh, wait a minute, are you discriminating against handicap? Anyway, there's a list there in your book. Make sure you look at those. And once you kind of read those, you'll get it. You'll get why you can't say, you know, certain things in your advertising. But the things like the great building for single professional or great family neighborhood or great Jewish neighborhood or great Italian neighborhood. I mean, any of those kinds of things are like very obvious right out. Okay. False denial false denial of availability. We talked about this in that Coles versus Havers case. All right. So, but no false. If you are advertising that there is an apartment or rental, make sure that you show anybody who wants to see it. We can't, you know, you can't say. It's hard to really monitor how well they are following the rules. They might show it to everybody, but why did this person get denied and that person didn't? You know, especially if one person had a better credit report or, you know, whatnot. But pretty much, you know, there's going to be one of those days, especially if you do it continually, that somebody is going to bust you on it. So advertising containing discriminatory preferences or limitations on the account of protected classes. Examples of fair housing phrases in violation. Professional couple preferred, great for one, meaning great for one person. We don't think we want you to have a family here. In a quiet adult community, maximum 2 people, 3 people, there's an extra charge. That last one, maximum 2 people, 3 people, extra charge. You cannot do that. Remember, just like the security deposit, you can have first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit and a rekey fee, and that's it. And if you say it's $1,000 in the newspaper and somebody says, oh, that's great, you know, and it's going to be, we're a couple, and then it's going to be, you know, our child. So it's going to be 3 people. You can't say, oh, yeah, well, you know, we'll have 3 people in there, but I got to charge you another $100 for that. You can't do that. It's illegal. And the only time that they can say a maximum number of people is if the building codes are going to, mandate that. So, you know, this happened in Boston. It was a sad story. A lot of these college areas where they have, you know, tons of kids living in, you know, different apartments, and they're sharing the expenses. And there was this one case, just long story short, there was a fire in the building. And, you know, college people, you have like your books, you have bikes, you have, you know, skateboards, you have all this stuff that's in the shoes. in the hallways and so forth. And in this one apartment, there was so much stuff because there were too many people in the apartment for the size of the square footage of the place. And the fire got, there was a fire and one of the young women did not get out. And so now that happened in Boston, and now it's really, they're really strict on how many people in certain areas, in certain the cities, actually any areas that the building department can say, if there's X amount of square footage, there can only be so many people living there. Appraising, same thing. You cannot do an appraisal. You have to look at and we talk about this in the appraising. You do an appraisal on the house, you look at the comps, you look at the condition, you look at all that good stuff, and then you say, this is what we think the house is worth. You don't look and say, there's this type, of community right down the street or this or that, and base your appraisal on any protected class. It's illegal. And then denial of a loan application, false availability, blockbusting. We're going to get into those in a moment. Right now, actually. Blockbusting, redlining, steering. You absolutely need to know these definitions, and you are going to need to know them. Probably you'll see one or two on general. You'll see it on Massachusetts. Either way, you need to know them. They always have those questions in the fair housing area. So blockbusting, you see this ad, it says, look at these homes now. An entire block will be ruined by a Negro invasion. This is a real life ad, okay? Every home marked on an X is now occupied by Negroes. Save your home, vote for segregation. But a lot of the ads said, save your home, or too late now. That's the one I keep wanting to change this. Too late now, sell now, or before it's too late, sell now. So what blockbusting is going to that seller and saying there's a whole protected class of people coming into this area, and that is going to devalue your property. So you scare them into listing and selling right now because you say, because this protected class is coming in here, your property is going to be devalued. And you think like this is, I don't know if this even has a date on it, but you can kind of tell by the ad and the picture and so forth. Oh, well, that happened long ago. Believe me, it still goes on. And HUD and, a lot of organizations are cracking down on this nonsense. So blockbusting, it is, letting people, scaring people into selling their home because telling them it is going to be devalued because of a protected class that's moving in. Redlining. Remember, redlining has to do with financing. All right, redlining has to do with financing. So if you look at this, you see, red line, it says hood, another one, don't even think about it. Okay, question mark. Up in the corner, big dollars. Over here, okay. So what they actually did, if you look at the cities, how a lot of our cities are laid out, you go, okay, Boston has the North End. What do people think? Oh, cannolis, Italian section, Southie, Irish, and same with Providence, Federal Hill, that whole area. Oh yeah, Italian area. This, at least it was in those areas. It's changed a lot. But when people first started coming here, lenders would take a map and they would get a red pen and they would circle areas and they would say only Black people we're going to loan money to only Black people here. Loan money to only brown people here. Loan money to only the Irish over here. Loan money to only Italians over here. They want to come over here, like the top one says, don't even think about it. So basically, redlining has to do with financing and not lending people of a protected class or race, religion, whatnot, in a certain area. So they were trying to keep everybody in one area. Way against the law. Oh, I got to move this. What if I told you you accidentally discriminated? Got to move that slide. It says tearing. Anyway, it's supposed to be steering. I can't move it on here because this is not the original. Anyways, steering. We talked about that case a minute ago where we said that they were steering that black man to another complex down the road because they did not want him at that apartment complex. But you can do steering even if don't know you're doing it. Basically, what steering is steering somebody in a direction to look for an apartment or a house because you feel, either because you want them to go there, you don't want them to be near you, or because you feel that's where they would be happier. So for example, say somebody comes, they're from out of the area, and they come and they say, and you see that they're Asian, right? They don't say anything to you about wanting to be in an Asian community or blah, 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 blah. And even if they did, by the way, tell them to look, you're going to send them a bunch of houses, tell them to go drive around the neighborhoods and let you know which ones that they want to see. You're not going to say, oh, by the way, that one's in an Asian neighborhood. And certainly do not, if they tell you they want a 4-bedroom house with a fenced-in yard, they can't spend more than $300, don't go, okay, let me see. Well, they're Asian, and I know this is a big Asian community over there, and let me see if I can find. And then you only send them houses in that area. And then they're like, wait a minute, I was just online on Realtor.com, and I saw this house, this house, this house. Why didn't you send me those? Oh, wait a minute. Did you just send me those because I'm Asian and that's an Asian community? Boom, you're bagged. You may have thought you were being nice. Don't. Just look at the information, that technique of matching. Just look at the information that they give you, and you just go on MLS. They might say, I want this town, this town, this town. That's fine. You're not going to give them properties over the whole state, but go look in those 3 towns and say, okay, here's your search criteria matched. So it's easy to kind of cross that line and be steering somebody with no, not intentionally trying to discriminate. Don't do it. You have to be very careful. Okay, we just talked about this. You cannot have any appraisal report with value impact on any of the above classes. Making notations indicating discriminatory preferences. No coerce, intimidation, or interference. Again, people have the right to live where they want to live if it's within their means. They cannot be intimidated or coerced into going somewhere else. All right, relative to handicap, I'm going to try to show you, I don't know if you were on here, Chelsea, when I was talking to Heather. I'm going to try to bang out of here and put on a video. And the one I want to show you has to do with handicap emotional rescue dogs. I'm just hoping that once I play this video, I can then come back to my slides. So this is kind of an experiment.
On January 28, 2020, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development issued long-awaited guidance offering housing providers a set of best practices to help navigate the often tricky scenario of assessing a person's reasonable accommodation request for a support animal under the Fair Housing Act. Under the Fair Housing Act, or FHA, a housing provider must modify or make exceptions to pet policies which may be necessary in order to allow a person with a disability an assistance animal in order to have equal opportunity to enjoy and use a dwelling. As a reminder, assistance animals under the FHA covers a broader range of animals than service animals under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Assistance animals include a trained service animal or other animals that do work, perform tasks, assist and/or provide therapeutic emotional support for individuals with disabilities that affect major life activities. HUD reports
Is your
that
sound
60%
okay, guys?
of the fair housing complaints it receives relate to reasonable accommodation requests. With an increasing number of those complaints involving assistance animals, you can avoid legal liability by becoming familiar with and following this guidance. Indeed, not all circumstances are equal, and housing providers can sometimes face difficult determinations as to how to comply with the FHA's reasonable accommodation requirement. With its recent guidance, HUD attempts to reduce the burden on housing providers in those uncertain situations, allowing housing providers to more easily identify the types of documentation they need and what they can request from an individual in support of the accommodation request. This helps housing providers distinguish between instances where a person with a legitimate but not so obvious disability requests a reasonable accommodation for an assistance animal versus where a person without a disability is simply trying to pass their pet off as an assistance animal to avoid paying pet fees or live in a pet-free property. HUD's guidance provides both a set of step-by-step best practices for assessing a person's request for an assistance animal as a reasonable accommodation and guidance on what information a housing provider may ask for regarding the accommodation request. 5 key takeaways from the best practices include: first, if a person has an observable disability, avoid asking the person for documentation supporting that the individual has a disability. Instead, seek confirmation of a connection between the individual's disability and the assistance animal. Second, and arguably most relevant of the key takeaways, housing providers can request reliable documentation, which HUD acknowledges is unlikely satisfied by the provision of internet documentation obtained by websites that sell certificates, registrations, and licensing documents. Third, housing providers may not limit the breed or size of assistance animals, but may refuse a reasonable accommodation for an assistance animal if the specific animal poses a direct threat that cannot be eliminated or reduced by the individual controlling the animal, such as keeping the animal in a secure enclosure. And fourth, a person requesting an animal other than a common domestic animal, such as a monkey, bears a substantial burden to demonstrate the need for the specific animal or specific type of animal. And fifth, before denying a reasonable accommodation request due to a lack of information confirming the individual's disability or need for an animal, the housing provider is encouraged to engage in a good faith dialogue with the requester. HUD's guidance also provides clarity regarding a housing provider's ability to obtain documentation of a person's need for an accommodation, often required when a person's impairment is not observable, such as an impairment substantiating the need for an emotional support animal. While HUD's guidance confirms that housing providers are entitled to request information about a person's disability and the need for the assistance animal, a housing provider may not require an individual provide his or her diagnosis. A housing provider may request information such as a federal, state, or local government-issued disability determination, a receipt showing the person's disability benefits, or confirmation of a disability from a healthcare professional, including information as to whether they have a professional relationship with the patient, the date of their last consultation, and whether the patient's impairment substantially limits at least one major life activity and why the patient needs an animal. Persons with disabilities who rely on the legitimate support of their assistance animals deserve the protections afforded to them by the FHA. With HUD's guidance, housing providers now have an additional tool to ensure such protections are provided, while also helping housing providers avoid extending such protections to those seeking to exploit weaknesses in the system.
Okay, I'm going to try to get back here now. Let's see. Oh, there I am. And let me see if we can go right back to. Oh, no. Yes, brought me right back. Yay, that means I'm going to play the other one for you in a minute when we get to advertising. So relative to handicap, that's one of the things. If you go to HUD and you say service or emotional support animals, you will be amazed that it used to be people think of dogs. They can have any animal, all right? And you just heard him say, what the requirements are, and you cannot have like this full-blown detailed information about what their health problem is or why they need it, because that would violate HIPAA. And they can have any kind of an animal, but if it's going to be some like really crazy, ridiculous animal and it is going to pose, problems to other people, then, there are remedies that you have. But also relative to handicap, the landlord has to make reasonable accommodations. Well, in the apartment and then in the workforce in policies. And we'll talk about the workforce in a minute. They have to make those reasonable modifications to the existing premise. Now, again, in your book, there's a whole list of things that are reasonable. Lowering, believe it or not, lowering the cabinets is considered reasonable accommodations. Putting sound, blinking lights for smoke detectors and not just sound for the hearing impaired, or looking or, putting braille numbers on the property, or putting railings in, putting ramps in. Okay, they have to be able to make those reasonable accommodations, or they have to make them, not have to be able to. Failure to design and construct new covered multifamily. So since about 1991, they have said now newly constructed properties have to have some handicap accessible features. Like the doorways in some of the newer properties are going to be larger. They're already going to make some of these accommodations, but if they don't have all the ones that this person needs, you can't say, forget it, I'm not doing it. You have to make them. Now, also in your book, it's going to give you a chart. It's going to give you that chart that says how much of the money-wise, the percentage. So somebody's not going to be made to do all these renovations and so forth if it's going to affect their bottom line, if they're not going to be making any money on their investment property anymore. So there is a chart, but basically they have to do it. What's the property that's covered? Any residential property, not commercial. Any residential property, if it's handled by a real estate broker, there can be no discriminatory advertising. Again, this is relating to handicap now, saying, you can't say, oh, this apartment is not handicapped accessible. And again, HUD is one of those organizations that we are going to call if anybody has any problems. These are some of those things. We don't take kids. We don't take teenagers. I can't assign you a handicapped parking space. Oh, you're handicapped? You need to come here. I can't give you a handicapped parking space. You have to park way in the back. First come, first serve. And then some of these are just we only take people who speak English. The ad was wrong. The rent is really $75 more. Why? Because you called and you said you had children or whatnot. So before we get into this, the written statements, I do want to tell you that you are also going to see in your book mention of the ADA. So the Americans Disability Act. Know what that is? American Disabilities Act, with Disabilities Act. It's not a housing law, so to speak. but it still has implications in our business, and you need to know about it for the exam. So the ADA requires that employers, and this is where a minute ago I said make reasonable accommodations, and I said not just in property. Well, it's in the business too. Make reasonable accommodations to an individual, for an individual that has a disability, making the work site more accessible, restructuring a job. Maybe they need to restructure the job, providing part-time or flexible schedules. Maybe this person needs to have more, flexibility because of doctor's appointments or physical therapies or whatnot. You can't do things like say, all right, everybody, I know everybody gets sleepy, and so it's mandatory. As soon as everybody comes back from lunch, we all take a walk around the building. We take a walk around outside, and if it's snowing or bad weather, we take a walk around the building. You can't say that and then say to this person that's in a wheelchair, or has some other handicap that would make them, not be able to handle that. You can't say, you have to do this. This is mandatory. But mainly it's that restructuring of the job. It's that making reasonable accommodations. That's the ADA, Americans with Disability Act, and that affects the things that go on in the workplace. All right, when we talk about what types of properties that this is going to all affect, we talk about a single family property. If it's privately owned with a broker, you have to abide by everything here. If it's privately owned and you have discriminatory advertising, you are going to still get fined. So if it's privately owned, and even if you're not using a broker, you cannot ever have discriminatory advertising in your ad. You can still rent to or sell to whoever you want to, but you can't put in your ad, be as blatant as put in your ad, no, this person need to apply. No handicap need apply. Nobody with children need apply. You can do what you want to do in your own house if you're not working with the broker, but you can still not use discriminatory advertising. If it's privately owned with more than one house sold in 2 years, then you're not going to be treated as just that individual. Remember, we went through that vocab. You're not going to be considered as just an individual anymore. You're going to be considered as an investor. And so now, this isn't not just your individual. You're an individual. You're a frequent flyer. You're an investor. You're buying properties. You're selling them. You're buying properties. You're selling them. You've done more than one in a year. So, or more than one in 2 years. So all of the rules apply to you. You get no breaks. You cannot discriminate on who you're going to rent to. Privately owned. If you're privately owned, with more than 3 houses owned, you're considered a dealer. And as far as that stuff goes, I put it in there because I see it here and there. I don't know that I necessarily see it that much on your exam. Just know that if you're an individual and you are not using a broker, you can sell or rent to whoever you want. However, you cannot advertise. You cannot advertise discriminatory. And if you are 2 or more, or 3 or more, like you don't have to know dealer, he's a dealer now, blah, blah, blah. Just know if it's more than that 2 houses in 2 years, or if you own more than 3 houses, then you're also not considered an individual, and all the rules apply. Not privately owned corporate, I guess I'll cover that one a little bit. So if it's a corporate, or if it's bank owned, a foreclosure, any of that, you still cannot discriminate. However, if it is clubs, do I have that slide? If it is a club or a religious organization, you can limit who is going to go into your club or your organization. So maybe it's a religious organization that owns a lot of property, and they're going to say, no, only people in my congregation we are going to rent to. That's allowed. All right. So, or, nobody can come, this is a private organization and these are the members that we take. There's a lot of private organizations that say white only, black only, women only, men only. And a lot of that is starting now to get challenged a little bit. But right now, private clubs or religious organizations may limit the occupancy. Covered multifamily designed buildings of 4, this part, no, buildings of 4 or more units has to have an elevator. And there also has to be ground floor accommodations if it's buildings of 4 or more units. So the ground floor accommodations are those garden apartments, they might call them. So it's an apartment building. They have to have garden apartments that make it accessible to the handicap. Now, thing about the garden apartment is if all the other apartments are taken and somebody comes looking to rent a place and the only one that you have left is a garden apartment, but that person is not handicapped, you don't have to save it for the handicap person. Like you don't have to leave rental space vacant in the chance that the handicapped person might come, but you have to have them. And if, so if they do come, they're vacant. Okay. You're following procedure, but you don't have to leave them vacant if you have no other availability. Housing not covered. Sale or rental of a single, this is kind of redundant, sale or rental of a single family by a private individual. Again, though, private individual, but what can they not do? They cannot discriminate against race. They don't have a broker. They don't do any discriminatory advertising with no more than one house sold in 2 years. Rental of an owner-occupied 2 to 4 family. Not covered for the owner, okay, but it's covered for the broker. So if it's a multifamily, 2 or 4 families, and the owner lives there, he can have a little bit more discretion on who moves in. And there's going to be some good examples of that in your textbook. Religious organizations, I just blast through some of these because some of them we covered just a minute ago. Housing for older persons. Know what HOPA is. H-O-P-A. HOPA. In 1995, Congress passed the Housing for Older Persons Act. That's what HOPA is. Housing for Older Persons Act. This repealed the requirement that the housing attendant for those aged 55 or older have significant facilities and services. So at one point in time, it said if you were going to say this is a complex that can only have 55 or older, you had to have all these other services, more like an assisted living home. But now they said, in 1995, they said, no, it doesn't have to be assisted living. There can be groups, there can be a complex that is just 55 or older. And it's just people that want to live with people their own age, seniors their own age. It still requires, though, that at least 80% of the occupied units have one person that's age 55 or older in it. So this can't be, oh yes, 55 years or older, but this place opened up. Oh, nobody 55 or older is coming to rent this, but I've got another couple that wants to rent it. We'll let them go in. You can't do that. So they don't have to have services, but they still have to have at least one person in there or at least 80% of it has to have at least one person in there who's 55 or older. Enforcement of the, oh, you know what? Wait 1 second here, because I don't think I have a slide. This is something new. Just make a note of this. There is, I have to make a note to add this slide. So I want to add a slide. Sorry, guys. I want to add a slide, and you're going to write down response to concerns of terrorism, because you will definitely see a question on this. And again, you know, in light of everything that goes on in our world, you know, things have changed in the few years. So I have to update my slides for this. So landlords and property managers have been working on developing new security procedures because of concerns for terrorist attacks. These procedures have focused on protecting buildings and residents. Landlords and property managers are also educating residents on sign of possible terrorist activity and how and where to report it. At the same time, landlords and property managers need to ensure that their procedures and education do not infringe on the fair housing rights. For screening and rental procedures, it is still unlawful to screen applicants on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, familial status. According to HUD, landlords and property managers have been inquiring about whether they can screen applicants on the basis of citizenship. The Fair Housing Act does not specifically prohibit discriminating based on solely a person's citizenship status. Therefore, asking an applicant for citizenship document or immigration status papers during the screening does not violate fair housing. Many years, the federal government has been asking for those documents and screening applicants for federally assisted HUD. So you are going to see a question like that. So it's going to say to you, you can't discriminate against race, religion, national origin, sex, handicap, familial status, all of that. And then it will say, it will give you some kind of a word problem, and it will say, you know, Joe asked for, the couple's, asked if they were citizens. You know, was there a violation? He was in violation of, and they'll put a bunch of things there, and then they'll say none, no law, whatever. So it's, that's important for you to remember. It's something new. And I think because it's new, you see it more often. Sometimes with these tests, when there's new things that come down the pike, they throw these new questions in there. But sometimes there's a few questions in that test, and we never know which one they are, but there's a few questions that are sort of like test questions. They throw them in to see how are people responding to that question. They don't count it as right or wrong. They just want to see, are we teaching these things correctly? And then once it's been a law for a while, and once people start getting it right on the exam and so forth, then they'll start making them count. So I don't know where they are in this procedure, but I know that there's a good chance that you will see that on there. Just know that it is not against violating fair housing if they ask if they are citizen, you know, what their citizenship status is. What do you do? Enforcement of the 1968, you file a complaint with HUD. So the first place they would go, they file a complaint with HUD. HUD has another part of their organization called the Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Agency. That's who it would end up going to. So basically what would happen is they would have a hearing. I think, it will tell you in your book, that the agency can be fined from $16,000 to $16,000 to $65,000 for your first offense. and then all the way up to 100,000 for third offense. And that's just, that's not even counting your any other penalties that might come on top of it. So then they could file also civil action. Doesn't cost the complainant anything to file. So remember, the complainant respondent doesn't cost the complainant anything to file. The HUD has 10 days to investigate, 10 days. And then within 10 days, the respondent has to respond as well. So that's pretty much what they would do. Okay, we're going to very quickly go through Massachusetts. What time is it here? 1:25. Now remember, we get to 2 hours. I knew this was going to be a long one. Did have another video I wanted you to see, but I don't know if we're going to get to it. Maybe we'll do that instead of the quiz. Because it has to do with social media, but that's something that once you guys pass your test, it's not going to be on the test. So I just like you to know about it. Fair housing with social media. Anyways, Massachusetts law discriminates, 151B. Oh, my goodness, sorry. 151B. I don't always want you to know a ton of laws. One of them that comes up is 151B. Just remember, write it down. 151B relates to Massachusetts discrimination laws. If you notice in Massachusetts, and you're going to see this in your book, we're not going to read every single one of them right now, but I absolutely want to point out to you, if you look on one side of this slide, race, color, religion, I want you to look at the differences though. These are the protected classes in Massachusetts, okay? Not just that national religion, race, color, national origin, sex, so forth. Race, color, religion, sex, sexual orientation, and so forth. Again, I'm not going to read them all to you, but I want you to know what these are. You're going to say, oh my God, this is so much memory. You're going to remember it. You have that acronym to remember, the Fresh Core in 1968. You know that in the 1800s, it was just race. But when you see the question in Massachusetts exam on fair housing, it is going to just, it's not going to make you list every single one of them. It's going to say, Joe did not rent to Sally because of her genetic information or her ancestry, blah, blah, blah. Did he violate any laws, or what laws did he violate, or whatnot? So when you look at this list and you remember it, are you going to be able to come to me and say, Dawn, all right, let me see. I mean, maybe you will. I still can't. I forget something, and list every single, close your eyes and list every single one of them. No, you're probably not going to. But if you're familiar with it enough, when you see it on a question in the Massachusetts portion, you're going to look and you're going to say, oh yeah, veteran or member of the Metron. Yeah, he can't discriminate there. Gender identity. Oh yeah, Massachusetts cannot discriminate there. Genetic information. You see what I'm saying? So are you going to be able to write down every single one of them? Good for you if you can, but probably not. But you're going to recognize them, hopefully, if you see them on your exam. Just wanted to point out how many more different protected classes there are, and definitely learn them enough so you at least recognize them when you see it. This is all the same, so we're going to blow through it. You cannot discriminate against persons who have children. Massachusetts anti-discriminatory laws following types: single-family residents that are directly or through an agent offered to the public. Okay, same thing, right? Multiple dwellings, 3 or more independent family units, or continuously located on housing accommodations. The following specific activities are outlawed. Again, this is kind of we're redoing what we just heard. Refusing to rent, lease, sell any of the property because it's in a particular class. Making any inquiry regarding any of the protected classes. This is one that I want you to kind of take a look at. So I don't think I have the case. There was a case, you're going to see it in your book, where a realtor, there's a couple from Venezuela that came, and a realtor said, oh, you know, you just moved here. Where are you from? And they said, just making conversation, right? Where are you from? Oh, I'm from Venezuela. Oh, cool. So he takes them through. They fill out a report. He doesn't even pick. He gives the report to the landlord, and they don't get the apartment. Well, they move on. They find another apartment. Well, that comment that he made bothered the woman so much that she was upset. And she kept talking about it. And she said to her husband, you know, I don't think we got that apartment because you remember he said, where are you from? And we said, Venezuela. We didn't get that apartment for that. Now, do we know, in fact, that that's what happened? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But it didn't matter because they sued him and he lost big time. He lost, it was one of the highest, I don't think you'd have to know what the coverage was, but it was one of the highest, first time he had ever been accused of anything like that. And it was one of the highest payouts in Massachusetts on a discriminatory case. So you just need to be aware and be careful of the things that you're saying and the things that come out of your mouth. You might just be trying to be friendly. How do we get to know somebody? Oh, hi, where you from? Were your school teacher up there? Oh, cool. You love the schools down here. Or, how many kids do you have? Oh, great. You love it down here. Blah, 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 blah. We have to be very careful on what we say. You know, it sounds like I'm a talker. Can you tell? And I just love to know about people and their life and their this and their that and tell them about mine or whatnot. But, you know, you have, but it still comes easy to me when I am talking with clients and so forth, because I know, you know, I've been doing this for a long time, and I just know how sometimes people can, and even today, I think it's worse than it was 25 years ago when I started. People just take things the wrong way. So you just have to be very careful on how and what you say. Oh, this is the case. Linder versus Boston Fair Housing Commission. All right. Remember that name. This is the Venezuelan people. Let's see. Oh, and it says first complaint against the agent, one of the largest penalties. It ended up being $61,000. Okay. That was $61,000 for him saying, where are you from? Ah, you just moved here. Where are you from? Venezuela. Cool. Sorry, you didn't get the apartment. Somebody else did. They move on. They're happy. They moved on. They're happy. But she had been upset, insulted, and upset that even though they got another apartment, $61,000. Unlawful to deny any person access to a membership participation in multiple listing service. Okay. Multiple listing service where we put all of our listings so everybody in the world can see them. You cannot deny somebody into the multiple listing organization because they're in a protected class. These are some of the reasonable modifications that are done for your handicapped person or people. Installing raised numbers, doorbells that flash as a light, lowering cabinets, ramping a front entrance, vertical step. And here's the number I wanted to tell you. In Massachusetts, it is not required to bear the cost of modifying more than 10% of the units. All right, write that down, because I do think that you see that every now and then on the exam. 10%. You do not have to modify more than 10%. And no other additional insurance can be, or fees can be charged, because they have to, you know, you can't say, okay, I'm going to do all these things, but your rent's going to be $300 more a month. Can't do that. Exceptions. Generally, the owner required to bear the reasonable expense of modifying the structure to make them accessible. including those with the mobility hearing, blah, blah, blah. He is not required to pay for unreasonable expenses. So the cost and extent of the modification is kind of over and above modifications that will affect the marketing of the property when that person moves out. Depends on the type and size of the property and availability of federal deductions. You can get some federal deductions for these, but it's not limited to just that. Okay, does that make sense, guys? I am going to, even though you need to know these blockbusting, steering, red line, I'm skipping over them because we just did them. Notices. Notice stating that the office is compliant in Massachusetts. You have to put that up in the office. You have to put it up. So some of you may have heard me tell the story of the tester that came in and I had the license, but they were in my back office. Nope. She said, I'm not going to fine you, but I could. But if I come back, I will. Those licenses of all the people that work here have to be in the front office, as well as the equal opportunity housing sign has to be in the front office where somebody can easily see it when they walk in the door. And you can have a fine if you don't, up to $100, and then another one occurring in 60 days, and it can go up to $1,000. All fair housing complaints in Massachusetts. So we had talked about HUD, right? All fair housing complaints in Massachusetts are referred to and investigated by the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. They report directly to the governor's office. That's definitely one I want you to know for the exam. Obviously, that will be the Massachusetts portion. All right. I don't know that we're going to do this quiz. What time is it? Oh, let's do the quiz because you still might have time to do the last video. All right. Which of the following is not included under the fair housing laws of Massachusetts? I'll give you guys time because I'm really not sure how much of a delay we're on. So is it veteran status, marital status, bankruptcy status, or public assistance status? And I know this bankruptcy status. Good job. Let's see. Are you right? Exactly. The act of filing bankruptcy is not protected. That was excellent, Heather. And I didn't even leave that flashed up there for very long. Good job. Good job, Chelsea. Please, I'm just going to blow through them. Don't think that I'm going to try to give you enough time though. A broker has 4 prospective clients. Joe refuses to sell to Roman Catholics. Kim refuses to sell to people of Welsh descent. Lee refuses to sell to people who own foreign cars. Mike refuses to sell to rich white guys. Which of the broker's prospective clients is engaging in unlawful discrimination? Ba-da-dum-bum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da. So Joe refuses to sell to Roman Catholics. That's definitely one, right? So Joe, we know. So if you can find one that you know for sure, and then you look at the list, that's going to eliminate somebody else. That's going to eliminate one of those questions right off the bat. Okay, Chelsea came up with C, Joe, Kim, and Mike only. So Joe for sure. Kim refuses to sell Walsh. Yep. Lee refuses to sell people that own foreign cars. What? Mike refuses to sell rich white. The key there is white. So that's correct. All right. Rich white guy does violate because it's white in there. If he had just said rich guy, then that wouldn't be a violation. Man is moving to Washington, given a broker the listing for renting the house, gave the broker instructions that the property was not to be shown to people with children. The broker should inform the Fair Housing Authority, inform the Board of Registration, accept the listing. And sometimes that question says accept the listing, but tell them that, you know, it's against the law, refuse the listing. You're going to see this question, and this is one of those questions that it's like, what would you do? All right, what would you do if you were a real estate agent? What would be the best way to handle this? So the vocabulary is part of it, knowing how they put the vocabulary into a scenario, and then also, you know, concepts like what are your you know, real world, in the real world, what would you do? And how would that relate to the questions? And that's exactly right, ladies. Refuse the listing. I don't care how much we want that commission. And I don't care how much, you know, especially when you're new, that first one is just so great to get or whatever. But if you have a seller or a landlord who is saying, I don't want any brown, I don't want any black, I don't want any this, I don't want any that, you know, you just tell them to try to explain to somebody like that, it's against the law, I can't do it, I'll get in trouble, you'll get in trouble. They don't care. They don't want to hear it. It's not worth it for you to risk everything. So just walk away. Massachusetts anti-discrimination laws do not apply to which of the following type of residents? I think the other video I have was just on familiar status anyway, and I think you guys get that, but you can look up that on YouTube. I don't know why the one for social media isn't in this webinar, but I'll give it to you at some point. B and B. Excellent. B and B. Correct. Two people come into a broker's office, a blind woman in a wheelchair and a homosexual man. By refusing to show them any properties, the broker has committed unlawful discrimination against who? C, both people. And that's correct. Two people applied for 30-year mortgages with a mortgage company, a 14-year-old boy and a 98-year-old man. So if the two applicants are turned down, the mortgage company is unlawfully discriminated against who? Let me see if you get this, because we talk about this a little bit in our financing chapter. And I'll break it down for you a little bit, depending on how you guys do. while you're thinking too, I'm just going to say, I think that we're going to do a Saturday morning. And do it at 9:30 again. I know Heather said that worked. Jen, who's not on tonight, I know it works for her. I haven't heard from a few other people. Neither applicant. And that is correct. It's permissible to ask an applicant's age to determine credit worthiness, provided that no negative weight is given based on their age. No persons can be refused a mortgage simply because they're over the age of 62. So that's correct. I think we have one more. Landlord owns a 30-unit apartment building. What is the maximum number of units he can be required to bear the cost? So you got to do a little math here. Remember, it's 10%, right? While you're doing that, I want to see if I can find that video. So I think you guys can probably hear me, but you might put your answer up, but I want you to give me a minute. And I want to just see if I can find that. If I can put the link right in here. I can put the link right in here. Let's see what we can do. There was a girl that was really cool that explained it, and I'm not sure. So if you guys have answered, just don't think I left you. I just wanted to give you a couple of I wanted to see if I could do this. How long is this? Oh my God, that's a long one. No, that's too long. Sorry, honey. Bum, 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 bum. 6:15. All right, guys. I'll just find it and give it to you. I don't want you to. I really liked her. The girl was really good. Anyway, let me come back to you. Let me come back to you. B. Okay, good job. You guys can do math too. Oh my God, I thought that was the last one. Sorry. All fair housing complaints in Massachusetts are referred to and investigated by AA. How much time do we have here? Okay, one more. You guys probably gonna. Let me find my channel. I think I have this video on my channel because I really liked it. Then I'm going to see if I can put this video in here and we can end with it. I think I can do it. So that was B. Under Massachusetts license law, any licensee found in violation of fair housing can have their license suspended for a period of 60 days for the first offense. I didn't cover that. It is in your units and chapters, but I didn't cover it here. Oh, but you guys got it. You are like great. You are on the ball. All right, let me put my camera back on. And I am going to just end with this. All right, we have 5 minutes. Thank you guys for hanging out. I'd like you to watch the video. I'm going to play it. If you don't want to watch it, it's something that you're going to run into more in your working life. There might be a couple of questions, but we've already touched on them on the exam. But this is another one of those videos, the types of videos when you go to Fair Housing on YouTube that you'll see. So again, I'm going to just play this for you. Stay on. It's only 2 minutes, I think. And, any questions, as always, give me a call. Let me know. And let me know what I can do for you. And other than that, we're going to play the video and then you can have a good night. All right. Let me see any questions. Let me get into the video and then I think I can still go back to my chat.
Hey guys, Allie Boyd here, and
Spooling.
today's video for my IGTV is going to cover fair housing laws and advertising on Facebook. So this is becoming a really hot topic. There's actually a really hot topic. There's actually a lot, and I just want to make sure.
Can you guys hear it okay? Again, on my computer, it's being really funky. Something must be going on with my speakers.
Of course, we all want to make sure that we're compliant with fair housing guidelines when we do our advertising. But with Facebook's unique targeting options, the line targeting is a little blurry. I met with one client recently that simply segmented by age and said, I want to show this ad saying 25 to 45 was discriminating. Well, under further research, I found a few things that are now until any further information is released to those things. But there's a few things that are definitely in the and others that we So in all aspects, we have choice of who we want to advertise to. The reason being is that our messaging is different for different groups of people. You're going to speak to a millennial in a different way than you speak to a more established business professional or someone who is in their later years. It's just a different message that will resonate. So I believe that segmenting by age is totally fine. Some of the things that you may want to stay away from are segmented by family composition, such as single moms, working moms, an older child in the home, a younger child in the home. Those are things that when you use them as a solution, it becomes very sketchy. So you're able to choose who you want to show your ads to. And I believe as long as you are following your instincts and your best practices, this is who I'm showing the ads to. And the reason I'm showing the ads is because I feel like this message will resonate better with them. And not because this is the only group of people I want to show my ads to because I don't want anyone else living here. There are different demographics that are going to work better with different types of property. That's just the way it is. But make sure that your motives are not to discriminate when you are choosing. When you're comfortable allowing anyone to see this home or purchase this home or rent this apartment, but you're showing it to a specific group only because you feel like they would appreciate it more. Would you really want to stay away from? You can have your demographics and then exclude additional groups of people. If you are excluding by gender, by race, by disability, by their marital status,
sound is really crummy on my end. So if it's annoying, guys, you can close out. I don't mind. And just go watch it on YouTube.
Excluding people from seeing that. I believe if you do that, you're going to be well within the fair housing practices. Grow the fair housing logo on any ads to show people you are not discriminating, that this property is open to all people. I do not believe this applies. I do not believe this applies to run an ad to get listing ads. This actually came up because I was doing a series of first-time homebuyer seminars with the group, and they were concerned about making sure that they were following fair housing practices. To be honest, I'm not promoting housing. I'm promoting a free event to draw in first-time homebuyers. I don't use it for a lot anyways, but if I did, it would not be because I didn't want someone to live in a certain property. To live on promoting a listing, this is where it becomes a lot more critical that you stay within those guidelines. So do your due diligence, but ultimately follow your best instincts. Do not exclude certain groups from seeing an ad. Do not target people based on very specific data because those are the only people that you want living in that property. Simply target based on your message, your imagery, and the people that you feel like would best resonate with that message in that property. If you do that, I think you'll totally be fine. However, I would continue to update you on any news that comes of this. I want to make sure that what I'm doing for the real estate industry in terms of Facebook marketing is always compliant. I would never want to discriminate with any of my marketing. So this is something I'll continue to update you on, and as soon as I get new information, you will be the first to know. So stay tuned to my IGTV for more information. Thanks.
Okay. So that was just something that I wanted to put out there because some of you actually she's not on tonight, but I have a couple people that are doing their broker's exam. So we're already in the business and we're already using social media for our marketing and so forth. And so they're really like Facebook won't even run your ad, but it's good to know why. If you are going to become a broker and you're going to have other agents, it's good to be looking at your agents' pages to make sure that they're compliant because these things are getting checked on a lot. So other than that, guys, so you can go to that video right on, again, if you just Google YouTube social media, I think I have her name written down somewhere. I can send it to you guys if you want to hear her. But there's a ton of them out there. Check out the NAR videos, the National Association of Realtor videos. They have them on everything. Discrimination, the great couple of ones that bring you back into the past that show you the protests and so forth and what realtors back then were going through. Emotional rescue, they have emotional rescue. I always say, I want to play that Rolling Stone song, emotional animals and so forth. So that's it. I am going to send me an email. I'm going to shoot another email out to everybody to see if 9:30 works. I'm debating whether I'm going to do another lesson or we're going to do a math, the favorite. If you guys, I was waiting for you guys to look at some of the math that's on your digital chalk, but I haven't seen too many people get there yet. But, I'll figure out what we're going to do. In the meantime, just shoot me an email. I know I heard from Heather that works. Saturday works. And I will let you know, hopefully by tomorrow, if we're going to do Saturday or Thursday evening. All right. See you all later.